Second, Coldwell Banker, as some of you may know, the owned operation has something called the Studio, a marketing agency for agents. I think bar none, biggest, hands down, best in the industry, and they specifically asked me to tell you that they had nothing to do with my presentation today. So they really wanted you to understand that they're capable of great work, and that I did this myself. So they're really busy, they're rolling out a new product that we have, and I didn't want to distract them, so I went ahead and did it myself. Finally, and I'm not sure what, oh, there we go. So there you go, I even picked the font myself. They would frown upon me, but I happen to like it. Finally, you should know that I don't have all the answers, for sure. On my best day, I just have a handful of the right questions. But I think that's true. Probably any speaker doesn't mean you can't learn from me and from the person beside you and from the Lyft driver who dropped you off, but as long as you lower your expectations, we'll be just fine. To ensure that you lower your expectations appropriately, I'll tell you a quick story. Long gone far away, I was an investment banker in the tech sector in Silicon Valley during the last boom and bust. Remember the first time that we all lost our minds over .com? And at the time, I had a friend of mine who wanted to go to lunch to talk about an idea. His name is Lee. He mentioned to me that he had this concept with a group of guys where they were going to do a mashup of sort of Friendster, but for business. Does anyone remember Friendster? Now, Lee had joined a startup that had sold. He did really well with that. And he had just gotten married and bought a house. I said, man, you got a mortgage, a new family. You're thinking about having some kids. Definitely stay where you are. I think that's a terrible idea. I don't know who would ever use that, Friendster for business. He ignored me. The company was LinkedIn. It did okay. It did okay. They sold to Microsoft for a little over $26 billion. So there's a moral in there about my advice, but really I just want to point to the fact that we have now sold Lee a lot of real estate. So it worked out. Really, it all kind of worked out. Now that I think I've lowered your expectations appropriately, let's get into leading through the noise. So how can you, as a successful agent, run through that noise? Work in a very, very noisy environment, but keep focused. One of the first things to do, I think, is to debunk the noise a little bit, to understand it a little bit. So the first part of this, I'll focus on just breaking down what some of the noise actually is in the industry. For one thing, we have a societal obsession right now with disruption. Sort of anything's called disruption. Uber's disrupting the taxi industry. Slack is disrupting email. It's kind of a funny thing to even say, disrupting email, but that's sort of the headline, and it gets a lot of attention. It gets a lot of investment dollars, and it gets a lot of momentum behind it. We put them on the covers of magazines. They're always in our news feeds. Even if that disruption is really just destruction with no apparent value creation, it doesn't matter. That's been really celebrated until recently. The pendulum has been swinging sort of against us, against traditional business of any kind for a while, but recently the pendulum appears to have swung back. And I'll tell you, when it comes back, it looks more like a wrecking ball. So I don't know if you paid attention to WeWork recently. Yeah. WeWork is it's a landlord. That's not how they describe themselves, but they're a landlord. And they're backed by a company called SoftBank. SoftBank is a big investor. They've got something called the Vision Fund. They're the ones who backed, the biggest investor in Uber, biggest investor in Slack, biggest investor in WeWork. For our sector, WeWork, Open Door, and Compass. SoftBank's the single biggest investor in all of those. And when you look at what's happened most recently, the pendulum has swung back to WeWork, and it's somewhat bewildering, right? Because that's part of the noise. This is the noise that growth is the only good, that really that's how we should all be valued. Anybody who's doing anything even mildly traditional, then you're basically going to die soon, and we don't really know why, and nobody needs to make money anymore, and it's sort of very confusing for a lot of people. And then what happened was WeWork filed their S1, which is to take a company public. That's what I used to do. I used to take companies public as a banker. Their S1 showed that their revenue equaled their losses. Now, let's clarify, not their revenue equaled their expenses, because that would mean they're break even. The revenue matched their losses, and as their revenue grew, their losses grew, which they thought was awesome, right? I mean, very cool, just ask them. But the public investors, public markets, didn't think it was quite as awesome. In fact, they thought it was quite lame, and so the reaction's been pretty swift. They were valued at about $47 billion a few months ago. Who knows what their value is today, but their CEO stepped down yesterday. They've got 2 new CEOs, because that always works great. And they're going to try to cut costs and right size, and we'll see what happens there. But it's important for us to note that while the noise can be really strong and really in one direction be somewhat confusing, we can also kind of ignore that noise, because a lot of that noise doesn't necessarily have a great basis. For instance, One thing you may not know, this is true of pretty much every company that's highly valued out there, including those other SoftBank holdings of, WeWork, Open Door, and Compass. When a venture capitalist invests in a company today, a little different than back when I was in the game 15 plus years ago, they usually invest a small piece at whatever the headline valuation is. And most of their investment goes at a much lower valuation. So for instance, SoftBank invested in Uber. I think the last round was, don't hold me to it, but somewhere around $6 to $8 billion of value. Most of the money they put into Uber at the time was actually at like $42 or $47 billion of value. But they put a little bit in at 68. Why would they do that? Well, because it gets a headline, right? It gets a big headline of huge valuation. Well, but still, if it's fake, who cares? Well, they care a lot because they're trying to attract engineers. They're trying to attract employees to work with them. They're trying to attract attention, get free media impressions, right? So it really works well. For some other companies, they're trying to attract consumers, like Open Door, right? They want people to hear about them on the news and then think they're the next greatest thing. And so, go check out opendoor.com, potentially try and sell their house. If you're Compass, you're trying to attract agents who see that headline and think that all is going swimmingly and maybe move their business over to you, right? So this is part of the noise. It's part of what we all have to just comprehend and then put our heads down and do our work. Now, you can look back even further at other noise that we've all heard in this industry and around this industry to determine whether or not you're a believer in sort of this concept. For one, all retail is going online, right? Remember how long we've been hearing that Amazon is putting everyone else out of business, putting retailers out of business. We're currently in a little section of downtown LA here that's like chock-a-block with new retailers, but maybe that's an anomaly, right? Because clearly everyone buys everything online now. What percentage of stuff do you think is bought online now? Like if you go by my house, it's like 114% of all of our purchases. But like, what do you think? What do you think it might be?
80-something, 90?
80 or 90%. Thank you for playing along. Some people go like 2%. I'm like, get out. So 80 or 90% seems really impressive, right? 14%. 14% of all retail purchases are online right now. Don't get me wrong. That's huge because we buy a lot of stuff. We like to wear clothes. We buy food. We do all kinds of things. 14% is a lot, but it's still not what you'd think by media, right? By what you would be reading. 14%, that means 86% of the time, we all do the old-fashioned thing of ride our horse to the general store and buy goods, right? We might even use money instead of Bitcoin, right? Because we are living in the past, right? We're holding on to those traditional values no matter what. Now let's look at some of the things that have impacted our business a little bit more. Online listings. Remember, online listings are coming, and they're obviously going to eliminate our business, right? I mean, why would anyone need us? Because clearly the only value we provide is being able to tell them which address a home might be for sale, right? What's happened? Broker-intermediated transactions have gone up, not down, since listings have gone online. Our industry has gotten bigger, not smaller, since listings have gone online. Okay, well maybe that's just a lucky strike, right? Maybe it's just the two of them. What else? Some of the other things? Millennials. Millennials are definitely not going to buy houses, right? They're definitely not going to buy houses. They watch their parents go through a downturn. They don't want big houses. They don't want to live in the suburbs. They're all going to live like in bus shelters in the city and wear plaid and ride fixie bikes and drink coffee and avocado toast. And what's actually happened? Millennials are the single biggest buyer group ever. And what are they looking for? A lot of the same things that people were looking before. What's important to a millennial who's starting a family? Well, they're thinking about schools, they're thinking about neighborhoods. Do they want the exact same house type that their parents look for? No, and neither did their parents. And neither did their parents, right? We're not all living in like log cabins because things evolve, right? So that didn't quite happen. What about tiny houses though? I mean, you cannot turn on the TV without seeing a show about a butterfly farmer who's moving into a tiny home in Costa Rica, and his budget is $7.5 million, right? And he looks at 3 different options. And so just raise your hand if you live in a tiny home, because I'm sure, I mean, it's California. It's the most expensive place to live in the country. The weather's fantastic. There's no better place to live in a tiny home. Given they've taken off like wildfire, I assume we all live in tiny home communes. Is that not accurate? Interesting. All right, so I mean, there's a lot of noise here that we're talking through that we're sort of debunking. So maybe one of the things we can keep in mind if we're trying to thrive through the noise is some of these examples. It does not mean we should not pay very close attention to what's going on. It does not mean we should not be an expert in what's going on. For instance, tiny homes. You should be an expert in tiny homes. You'll probably never sell a tiny home in your lifetime. But shouldn't you be the subject matter expert in all things related to your field? Shouldn't you know everything there is to know about iBuyers? iBuyers, that's another one. right? Didn't they already like put everyone out of business? Someone predicted early this year, I think, that 60% of all transactions will go through iBuyers because, like, we don't need to do math anymore, I guess. So, but that's not happening. As a matter of fact, in Maricopa County, Phoenix, right, where iBuying started, that was ground zero. What happened with iBuyers? It's declined. The percentage of all transactions going through iBuyers actually declined. So I'm not saying it's going to go away. There may be some value that's delivered there, but I am saying that the headlines don't belie the truth, right? So we should all be paying close attention. So let's debunk this a little bit more. So when I think about some of the individual aspects of some of these firms, I think one of the best ways to look at it is to go a little bit deeper into SoftBank. So SoftBank, again, the three biggest investments in our sector: WeWork, which is a landlord; Open Door, which is a home flipper; Compass, which is a brokerage. Now, none of those three firms describe themselves that way, but those are the things that they do. When we look at the founding narrative, any company that's trying to create noise in our space, they always have a founding narrative, right? It needs to be really good. It needs to be really compelling. Hopefully emotional. Usually they start with something where I tried to buy a home and the transaction was so bad that I started a company to fix all of that and eliminate all of the, the experiences that I had. If you look at those three firms, their founding narratives were, they've pivoted over time, right? They've changed a little bit because, if one thing doesn't work, you want to pivot and do something else. Your founding story shouldn't change over time, but, some do. WeWork, they're a tech company, right? They're a tech company that leases or purchases buildings and then leases them out to others, right? So it doesn't sound like tech, but they use tech. They say they use tech to decide where to actually lease spaces, which I think we do too. I mean, I use Google Maps. I don't consider myself a cartographer, but I do use Google Maps when I'm trying to go somewhere. And their founding narrative was they're really a tech company. They signed 15-year leases, and they lease them out for 15 months, roughly, on average. 15-year leases, they sublease for 15 months. What could go wrong, right? Well, they've signed up leases for about $47 billion of leases, and they've signed subleases for about $3.4 billion, which is about $47 billion less than $47 billion, roughly speaking, right? So that's a pretty big, delta there. When you look at Open Door, as I mentioned, their business has declined a little bit in Maricopa County, or at least iBuyers in total have declined. If they're in your markets, you've probably wondered with amazement that you've got iBuyers coming in, Zillow, for instance, Knock, OfferPad, whoever it is, who seem to be selling homes for less than they're buying homes sometimes. And when you took your licensing course and had to do math, you viewed that as not good, and they're viewing that as potentially good. Now, they're trying to get share. They're trying to get people to come into the fold. They're trying to grow business. So maybe it's okay. But right now, if you actually ask those firms, are they gross margin positive, meaning top-line revenue minus some of the big, the actual cost of the home and the service, they say in some markets we are. That's, that's a cagey answer, right? So should I buy this home? Maybe. There's a home for everyone. I won't go as much into Compass, but there's some corollaries there with Compass as well that perhaps some people in the room know. As we break those things down, we start to discover that there's a lot of problems with some of the theses out there. But if we keep ourselves focused, on making sure that our business plan pencils out, right? Their business plans don't have to pencil out until the rubber meets the road, until they actually file to go public, and then they get scrutiny like WeWork went first, and we'll see what happens with Open Door and Compass. But those who actually file, they get a lot of public scrutiny. But we should keep in mind some of the lessons that we've learned from those groups, right? Our business plans need to pencil out.